Am I the a-hole for telling my mom I'm not an aunt and not going to pretend just for her? My mom married my stepdad when I, 20 female, was 7 and my stepsister was 6. You might think after all these years we would be good, but nope. She was such a freaking nightmare to deal with, and it only got worse after her dad took custody of her from her mom when she was 13. It wasn't just me either. She smashed up the collection of photos my mom had of my uncle, her brother who died when they were kids, and she made sure those photos could not be salvaged. She broke something valuable that her grandma, my stepdad's mom, owned. As for me, she would spit in my pillow so I couldn't sleep on it. She would tell me to give her stuff, so when I get a phone, she demanded I give it to her. If I was eating a chocolate bar, she demanded it. Her dad at one point had her in therapy 3 times a week, and he would punish the hell out of her for stuff like spitting and breaking stuff. One time, when we were 15 and 16, we both got in trouble because she tore the photo I had in my bedroom of my dad and grandparents, and she smudged food stains all over the fragments left, and I lost it. I told her she freaking sucked. And I was so glad she was not my real sister because I would never want to be family with someone so unlovable as her. That I never disliked anyone as much, and my life was so much better without her in it. After that, things were very different. My mom said she understood that I was upset, but that I should never say such cruel things to someone. She encouraged me to apologize and say I hadn't mean those things. But I had. My stepdad and I had gotten along okay up to that point. But me saying his daughter was unlovable and that I wished she had never been in my life was a step too much for him, which I get. We pretty much coexisted after that. Had therapy and all that, but I think my mom was the only one truly all in at first, and then my stepdad eventually. But my stepsister and I were not interested in repairing things. For me, they were just never good to begin with. Now I live with some friends and live pretty far from my mom. My stepsister recently moved back in with them after she had a baby. And my mom has tried to convince me that this is the perfect time to put the past in the past and move forward. She has brought up my being an aunt many times before. And I know she's telling the truth that my stepsister's ready for it too. Because she sent me a video via my mom's Facebook saying that she had forgiven me for what I said and was ready to move forward. I got pretty tired of my mom trying and calling me an aunt, so I told her I wasn't an aunt. I told her I have no siblings, and so I can't be an aunt. She told me it was childish to say that when everybody else is ready to move on from all that. I told her I was not, that I had never grown to care about stepsister and did not want to be in her life, or to have her in mine, and her child was an extension of that. She's mad at me for saying that, and my stubborn stance. Am I the a-hole? Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole. She has forgiven you, not apologized. Exactly. The entitlement continues. It's such a gaslight. I will never get what makes people narcissistic like this. People tend to not want to admit when they did something wrong. Even if the stepsister is better now and knows she was an a-hole, which may not be the case, it'll take a lot for her to not be stubborn and admit it. Not the a-hole, but everyone else's. Especially your mother and stepfather, who did nothing to stop your stepsister's cruel behavior, especially after she ruined precious photos of the deceased. Why on earth did they let her get away with so much? She was punished, but it was not like she cared all that much. Her dad was always grounding her, and he had her in therapy. But she just loved doing stuff to hurt people she and her mom didn't like, and didn't give a damn about the consequences as long as she got what she wanted. Like when she full-on had my mom sobbing after destroying the photos of her brother. Not a-hole. One day you might feel ready to let bygones be bygones. But until that time, they can't force you. Your feelings are valid. I also don't like that stepsister forgave you, but didn't own her crap and apologize. She sounds like the same narcissistic a-hole who hurt you on the regular growing up. Wait, what? She had forgiven you? She bullied you for years, and she had the audacity to say that. Sorry, but she needs to apologize for everything she did and acknowledge her fault in this. You are so not an a-hole. Now for the next story. Am I the a-hole for calling my dad a freeloader? I, 16 female, have been having a rough day with my dad, 56 male, today. First, he came into my room when I was in the middle of doing a presentation to yell at me for not answering his text. He had sent it 6 minutes prior to coming in. Everybody in my class heard him insult me for about a minute, until he finally understood I was presenting after me telling him for the 100th time. Immediately after my presentation, when I left my room, he told me I should have alerted him I was going to be presenting and that everything that happened was my fault. Because of this, I was already pissed off at him, which is important for the next part of the story. Later in the day, after finishing all my schoolwork, I was cleaning the dishes, which were a lot of since my mom is busy with work and my dad refuses to clean his plates. I really don't mind doing them, but the problem came up when my dad came downstairs. He started the entire conversation with, "Wow, you're finally doing something helpful around the house." After the whole day of him being a jerk to me, I finally snapped. I may have used a bit too colorful of language, but the main gist of what I said was, "I don't want to hear it from you when you're more of a freaking freeloader than I am. You don't do the dishes, you don't do laundry, you don't work, you don't walk the dogs. You do nothing but sit in your room all day, watch the news, mope, and be freaking miserable." This obviously turned into a screaming match pretty quickly, with him calling me insensitive because I should have known that the only reason he doesn't have a job is because of COVID and how anxious he is with going out right now. I countered this by saying the least he can do is be nice, help around the house, alleviate some of the stress from my mom, or look for a job. After that, he told me to bug off, so I did. I went to my room and did finish the dishes. I'm worried I went too harsh on him by calling him a freeloader, because I know he has anxiety when it comes to COVID and working at this time. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. He was acting like a huge a-hole and deserved it. He's being hypocritical for judging you for not doing anything, even though he doesn't either. He needs this wake-up call. Judging her for not doing anything either. She was in class / doing homework most of the day, which should be her #1 priority at her age. This. Also, anxiety doesn't justify being a freeloader. Opie's dad is an awful dad, and it sounds like a worse husband. Lots of people have anxiety issues, and we manage to not be freeloading jerks to our loved ones. Not an a-hole. Any slight a-hole behavior seems justified. He needs to grow up. COVID doesn't stop you from doing dishes / cleaning your house, etc. He may be depressed and anxious, but in the real world you still have to get on with things. You can't just peace out because you don't want to handle things when you have responsibilities. Also, berating you for ages in general is BS, let alone when you're trying to do your schoolwork. Congrats, you're more of an adult than your dad is. Not an a-hole. The worst part is that he isn't just doing anything. He's doing nothing and giving Opie crap about not doing enough. Anxiety and depression don't do that. That's pure and filtered a-holery. COVID is stopping him from working and leaving the house. So what's stopping him from doing laundry and dishes, etc.? I can get why you snapped at him, although if his laziness is an issue, it's best between him and your mom. Not an a-hole. Yeah, I forgot to include that in my original post. I might have been an a-hole because I'm talking up to my dad, which isn't really my place. Kinda sounds like you earned it though. Parents often criticize without realizing how hypocritical they're being. Now for the next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my sister I'm not her mom and it's not my job to keep looking after her? I, 21 female, have a sister, 18 female. My parents put me in the worst position of being her keeper / caretaker when we were kids. I was expected to help her with homework, help her with friend problems. If she was in trouble with a kid, they would ask me to speak to the kid or an older sibling if they had one around my age. I was responsible for walking her to and from school on my way to school. My mom would make me late sometimes because she was running late and I wasn't allowed to leave without her. I was in a different school to her. It was so bad when we were teenagers. I got the job of explaining periods to her, the job of looking after her when they weren't home, and that was a pretty regular thing with them. When I moved out, I distanced myself from all of them. I didn't want to be responsible for her anymore, and I didn't want to end up having them push her to live with me. And she wanted everything. She wanted me to cook for her, buy clothes for her, take her places, help with homework and other school stuff. She would also want me to sit and listen to her vent all her problems. So anyway, she moved out of our parents' house and cut them out of her life. And then she reaches out to me and says she needs me to help her out. She was struggling to pay rent, struggling with school, and she wanted to move in with me or have me come over every day to help. I told her she needs to figure stuff out for herself. She told me it was my job to help her, and I said no. I said I am not her mom, and it's not my job to look after her. That it should never have been my job. She's pissed, and one of my friends thinks I was too harsh since I'm the only person who ever really took care of her. They think I should at least try to get her up and running and teach her to be independent. Am I the a-hole? Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole, but to be honest, neither is your sister. Your parents, on the other hand, massive a-holes. What your parents did to you is parentification. It's a form of child abuse. You're completely correct. It shouldn't have been your job to raise your sister, and I'm sorry your parents made it your job. Although you of course have no obligation to continue to help your sister, I just want to note that it's not her fault either. You were both kids. Yes, sadly, the sister isn't at fault either. Maybe she could have figured it out that what they had is mainly considered weird and unusual. But since it has always been like this, I can see why she didn't. What Opie could do is give her advice on things if it isn't too much. Like if she asks her how to do laundry, to just text her the steps and what to look out for. But honestly, after all this, I would probably not even do that. But maybe Opie's a better person than I am. Not the a-hole, but the anger should be towards your parents, not her. I have not spoken to them since I moved out. But I just don't want to end up being responsible for her again. This falls into the category of life isn't fair sometimes. It's not always a simple matter of if-then decisions. Are you the a-hole for wanting your own life and own obligations? No. Is there a vulnerable human being that you grew up with who is going to struggle, and yes, is going to burden you if you try to help her? Yes. This isn't where Reddit can help you. You have to determine your own personal ethics/morals. For my part, I would feel it was my duty to help her. If for no other reason, then there is no one else to do so. And there is a significant chance that she will suffer severe emotional harm from being rejected by you and her parents. That's me, not you. I would consider that you could make an attempt with very specific boundaries and very specific expectations, but it would be a gamble. Expectations like, you will learn to cook for yourself, you will learn to manage your own schoolwork, etc. I will help you, but you must consistently show independence as a goal for you. Sometimes we take risks to help others because they need help and there's no one else to help. Living only for ourselves is not how I want to live. Now for the last story. Am I the a-hole for calling my parents a-holes after they shared my former therapy diary with my younger brother? I, 20 female, have a younger brother, 15 male. I was 5 when he was born and had suffered a trauma during the pregnancy. I was alone in the house with my grandpa who had passed away while my parents were out of town. That made his impending arrival very stressful for me. To be honest, I was angry and sad. I did not want a sibling, and I know the next 3 to 4 years were very rough for my family. I would scream and cry and have night terrors, and when neither of my parents showed him any attention, I would lose it. There were times I would tell them to send him away. Times I would think things you should never think about anyone really. But the fact he was a baby and I was so young, it was concerning. My parents put me into therapy, and for about a month I didn't open up. I didn't speak at all. I wouldn't even play with the toys. So the therapist came up with the idea for me to write stuff down. She would let me write and I would do that. Most of it in the first year to year and a half made no sense, but it helped her a little because she could pick up on some things. There was a lot of heavy stuff in there, stuff that I hate that I wrote and felt. But I also know from my therapist that it was not my fault. And trauma affects everyone differently. And for me, the change of a sibling as well as the feeling of losing my parents to him were intensified by the trauma I had suffered. And I was incapable of not feeling like he was the cause or like if he went away everything would get better. I actually never showed my parents the journals. They knew they existed, but the therapist suggested they should not read them. But if I ever felt like I wanted to go over the journals with them, I could. I chose not to. They knew some of how I felt, but I never wanted them to hate me for feeling how I did. There were a lot of rough days. My brother never remembered any of it though. It turns out my parents actually kept them. I put them in the trash a couple of years ago before moving out as a kind of way of moving on from that, and my parents kept and read them. And not only that, but they decided a few weeks ago that my brother had a right to know. I had no idea about any of this until my brother DM'd me going nuts, saying I was horrible and how could I ever say those things or feel those things, and I was sick. I called my parents and they straight up told me he felt he deserved to know, and so did they. I told them they were a-holes, and they should not hold that stuff against me. They called me sick and said what I wrote went far beyond normal sibling rivalry or trauma. They basically said how dare I call them a-holes after that. Now, I'm just doubting whether I am being a jerk now. I'm so mad and feel like I'll never escape from this mess. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole, but digging another person's therapy journals out of the trash and showing them to family? Pure evil. Your parents just showed you exactly who they are. Believe them. I'm trying so hard to think of a good reason your parents show him those journals, Opie. There isn't one. It's inexcusable. Completely and utterly inexcusable. It's hard to blame the brother for being hurt. If they were as bad as you said, I'm sure it was upsetting, especially since he's still a kid himself. And even hard to blame him for lashing out. So he's not an a-hole. Nor are you. But your parents? What the hell is wrong with them? Not an a-hole. Wow. Your parents found a way to take your healed trauma and re-traumatize you and your brother in one go. That's straight up impressive a-hole behavior on their part. Your brother is not an a-hole because, frankly, he's 15 and your therapy diary is probably way too much for him to digest and quantify right now. Maybe ever. Your parents are the a-holes times 2 for dragging him into this all over again. It's probably time to take a step back from interacting with them and go see a therapist. If your brother was willing, therapy with him would be a good idea to navigate this violent upheaval in your relationship. Upheaval in the relationship? Opie's parents destroyed it. It's probably gone. So not the a-hole. Wow. First, nothing you did back then was your fault. You were a child. Second, that wasn't theirs to share. Hey, let's introduce hate and discontent into the family. Your parents are terrible humans and should be labeled as such by you to their faces.
Update. Boss is pretending I never gave notice. Original post. I gave my 2 weeks notice last Tuesday. Handed the letter directly to my manager, had a short, straightforward conversation about transition plans, and figured that was the end of it. I've left jobs before and it's always been routine. Give notice, tie up loose ends, move on. Simple. Except this time, my manager is acting like it never happened. She's still assigning me projects that go well into next month, still putting me on a schedule for meetings 3 weeks away, and even asked me yesterday to order new business cards with my name on them. When I reminded her I was leaving, she brushed it off with a casual, "We'll see about that," and walked away. For context, I work in accounts payable at a small company. It's not glamorous, and it's certainly not something that requires years of specialized training. Anyone with basic bookkeeping skills and a couple weeks of practice could pick it up. But my manager keeps making comments like, "You can't just abandon us during busy season," and "We invested so much in training you." Training me to use QuickBooks 2 years ago? The strangest part came today. She actually scheduled me for a performance review in mid-November. I told her flat out, I won't be here then. She looked at me with genuine confusion and said, "What are you talking about? You never said anything about leaving." I was stunned. I literally handed her a signed resignation letter last week. I even have proof. I snapped a photo on my phone of me physically handing it to her. Yet she's acting like none of it ever happened. I don't know if this is denial manipulation or something else entirely, but it's bizarre. It's not like I'm some irreplaceable superstar who's impossible to replace. I process invoices, pay vendors, and balance accounts. It's important work, sure, but it's also standard stuff. People come and go all the time in this industry. As far as I'm concerned, my last day is still this Friday. I'm starting my new job Monday, whether she accepts my resignation or not. I'm debating whether to send another letter, forward a copy to HR, or just stop showing up and let her deal with the fallout. Has anyone else dealt with a boss who flat out refuses to acknowledge a resignation? This is hands down the weirdest work situation I've ever been in, and I honestly don't know if she really thinks she can stop me from leaving or if she's just pretending for her own peace of mind. Now for the top comments before reading the update. Whether they chose to acknowledge it or not, they'll soon be without you and they'd be smart to plan for such. Very odd indeed. Choosing to bury their heads in the sand is a bold move that will not benefit anyone. And do not share where you will be going. Sabotage has happened to many. Definitely not telling them where I'm going. Already learned that lesson from past jobs. Guess they're planning for you to haunt the office forever. Laughing out loud. I've had some bosses and co-workers that deserve a good haunting. Isn't that like when everything bad you predicted in your exit interview comes true? Pretty much. All those red flags I ignored are coming back to bite them now. Send a copy to HR and tell them when you submitted it to your boss. CC the boss manager too. Sounds like your boss isn't following protocol and will say you don't give notice. Leave as planned. I'll CC HR and her manager when I send the follow-up. Thanks. Now for the update. Thanks everyone for all the advice and support. You were all right about documenting everything and covering my bases. I sent a follow-up email to HR and CC'd my boss and her manager with a copy of my resignation letter and the photo I took of myself handing it to her. I also included screenshots with timestamps like some of you suggested. Got a call from HR within an hour. Turns out this isn't the first time she's pulled this stunt. Apparently, she did the same thing to someone else last year. They're handling it internally and confirmed my last day is a Friday as originally planned. My boss finally acknowledged my resignation today, though she acted like she was doing me a huge favor by accepting it. Whatever, I'm out of here in 2 days and starting fresh somewhere that actually operates in reality. Thanks again for helping me navigate this insanity. Next story. Boss keeps trying to reach out for help even a month after my resignation. I worked in retail operations, specifically on the team responsible for handling product displays and display tags. To give some perspective, we were dealing with around 5,000 products per store across 40 stores. It was a high-volume, repetitive process, but for more than 13 years, the workflow was simple and efficient. We'd handle everything through Excel, pass it along to the vendor, and that was it. Done and dusted. Then earlier this year, the design team decided they wanted to modernize the process. They rolled out a new, supposedly fancy layout system for the tags. In theory, it was meant to look sleek and professional, but in practice, it was slower, more expensive, and incredibly frustrating. The vendors who had to actually work with the system absolutely hated it. Most of them flat out refused to deal with the new design. The handful who were willing to do it quoted rates that went up to nearly $3 per tag. When you're talking about thousands of products across dozens of stores, that number isn't just high, it's astronomical. I decided to see if there was a workaround. I spent 3 days teaching myself InDesign's import and data merge tools. I'd never touched the program before, but I was determined to figure it out because I knew the costs would sink us if we didn't. After a lot of trial and error, I cracked the workflow. With the process I built, we could generate the same tags for about 7 cents each instead of $3. The difference in cost savings was massive, tens of thousands of dollars over the course of a year. Naturally, I told my manager about the system I developed and said we should train other people on the team to use it. My reasoning was straightforward. If I was ever out or left the company, they'd be stuck if I was the only person who knew how to run it. I didn't want to become a single point of failure. But instead of seeing the value in what I'd created, my manager, who was rude, insecure, and generally incompetent, snapped at me. Their response? This is literally the only job you do. Are you trying to dump it on others too? That told me everything I needed to know about how little they valued the work or the savings I had delivered. A few weeks later in July, I came down with a serious illness and had to take 3 weeks off. When I returned, still not fully recovered, my manager immediately lit into me over a supposed mistake in the tag exports. The issue was so tiny it was laughable, and in reality, it turned out to be their own misunderstanding. But instead of admitting that, they screamed at me in front of others as if I'd failed catastrophically. That was the breaking point. I quit on the spot. I didn't raise my voice, didn't make a scene, just calmly walked out. I followed up with an email to both HR and the CEO, making it clear that my manager's behavior was the direct reason I was resigning. My last official day was August 1st. Since then, I've received over 17 calls and texts from different people at the company, all essentially begging me to explain how to export the tags. The exact thing I warned them about had come true. No one else knew how to run the process I built. Every time I see one of those messages, I can't help but shake my head. They had the opportunity to train others and make it sustainable, but my manager's ego wouldn't allow it. Now I'm just waiting for my final settlement on the 15th. Once that money clears, I plan to block every single number tied to that circus. They can scramble on their own. It's no longer my problem. You have no responsibility to answer them at all. I hope you've been ignoring them completely. It's not your job to train them if you don't work for them. It's not your job to teach them how to do their own job. You quit, live your life, and move on. Ignore them. The mention of your final check made no sense. If they're not paying you, you owe them nothing. Come up with a contract, high pay for you, and just reply if they want to hire you. Not hourly, upfront amount for X amount of work. Bingo. Basically an FU amount. You'd hate to do it, but for X dollars you would conveniently forget you hate it. Set up a contract. Determine how long you would need, per person needing to be taught. Round up to the nearest 10 hours. If you guess you'll need 13 hours, round up to 20, and charge X per hour, where X is at least 4 times your hourly pay, padded with I&A charge, A whole tax, etc., to end up being 6 times your previous hourly wage. Payment in full, in advance, and no refund possible, unless you get sick or have to cancel due to acts of God or something. The I&A charge equals irritation and aggravation for dealing with the abusive people there. Also, no one should feel bad for charging $200 an hour for this. This is a specialized skill, and it is worth that amount of money, especially if they are panicking this much. Signed, a graphic designer who regularly charges corporate clients $200 plus an hour. Next story. Got laid off, then poached their biggest client. Oops. 3 months ago, my company announced a restructuring. No warning signs, no whispers in the hallways, just a Friday afternoon meeting where half the marketing department, including me, was told our positions were eliminated effective immediately. I'd spent the last 2 years managing their largest account, a regional restaurant chain worth about $200,000 annually. It wasn't just another client on the roster. I had built that relationship from scratch, earned the trust of their marketing director, and understood their brand better than most people inside their own company. It was my pride and joy project, and I had every intention of continuing to grow it. But apparently, the higher-ups didn't share that view. During my exit interview, HR blandly reassured me that they would redistribute my responsibilities and that the company would be fine without me. Let me tell you, nothing makes you feel more disposable than being told your biggest achievements can just be handed off like a stack of papers. I didn't sit around sulking, though. I started freelancing to cover bills while I looked for something permanent. About 6 weeks later, out of nowhere, I get a message on LinkedIn. It was from the marketing director of that same restaurant chain. She didn't mince words. The new person handling their account had completely botched a major campaign launch. The demographics were wrong, the creative was off-brand, deadlines were missed, and the entire rollout was a mess. Their frustration was clear, and she wanted to know if I was interested in stepping in as a freelancer since they were already exploring other options. It didn't take much convincing. I knew their business inside and out, and I was confident I could deliver better results than anyone they'd throw at the account. Within a week, I signed a contract directly with them, this time for $300,000 annually. That's more than they'd been paying my old company, but I'm now handling everything end-to-end: strategy, creative, and media buying. They saw the value in working with someone who actually understands them. The best part? Last week, my former boss called me in a bit of a panic. He asked if I knew why they lost their biggest client. I played dumb and said, no idea. Maybe they should have kept someone who actually understood the account. The silence on the other end of the call was priceless. And it doesn't stop there. In the last 2 weeks, 2 more of my former company's clients have reached out asking about my services. Word travels fast in our industry, especially when campaigns crash and burn. Meanwhile, I hear they're scrambling to hire 3 new people to try to cover the work I was doing alone. Here's the lesson. Sometimes you don't realize your own value until someone else shoves you out the door. Getting laid off felt devastating in the moment, but it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to my career. Now for the comments. Honestly, this is why I always tell people to document everything and keep good relationships with clients. Companies love to act like they're doing you a favor until they realize you were the one actually holding things together. The fact that your replacement bombed so spectacularly just proves you were worth way more than they were paying you. I kept all my client contacts and documentation. It made the transition seamless when they came knocking. This is basically corporate karma at its finest. After 10 years in the game, I've seen this play out so many times. Companies think people are replaceable until they realize how much institutional knowledge walks out the door. The fact that you're now making more as a freelancer while they're scrambling is just chef's kiss. Exactly. They don't realize how much walks out the door until it's gone. Their scrambling now is just confirmation I was worth more than they paid. And now they're probably trying to hire 2 to 3 people to do what you were doing alone. Classic move: cut costs by getting rid of the person who actually knew what they were doing, then spend way more trying to fix the mess. I got laid off from a sales job a bunch of years ago. 2 years later, I got a job on the client side of my industry. The guy who got my job came into my office to discuss opportunities. I knew him a bit from the industry. Good dude. I told him I'm not a spiteful person. I know he has a job to do, but he should probably focus on other clients. He pushed back a bit, and I told him to tell his boss I won't purchase a freaking thing from them, and if they bother anyone who works for me, I'll bury them to my fellow clients. It felt wonderful. Screw him, I still hold a grudge. Last story. My boss is trying to punish me for using legally protected sick leave. I work at a preschool in Washington State, where paid sick leave is legally protected. My employer has a blackout days policy, where they say staff can't call out sick on certain days unless they bring a doctor's note proving the reason they called out is due to a contagious illness. If that policy sounds illegal, you are so right. The other problem? They've been abusing it anyway. 5 out of the last 6 weeks were blackout weeks, and this week plus the next 3 weeks are also blackout. Basically, half the calendar is you can't be sick. On Monday, I used 1 day of accrued sick leave. HR emailed me saying it was unexcused and demanded a doctor's note. As I mentioned, that's an illegal policy. Washington state law only allows documentation requests after 3+ consecutive days. When I pushed back and cited the law, they made it personal. First, it's an unexcused absence, so I told them my absence is by law excused. Then, all of a sudden, we have concerns about your attendance, and you have a documented history of misuse. I don't. I've never had a warning. They dragged up absences from last winter when I was so sick I had shaking fevers. I went to the doctor, provided a note, and my director literally told me it was justified. Now they're trying to retroactively reclassify those days as misuse to justify punishing me because it was when I first started and didn't have any PTO saved up. Now suddenly it's an issue, and they say my annual review will reflect my excessive absences. That's classic freaking retaliation, plain and simple. Other coworkers who've stood up to this policy have had their vacation time taken away or been put on PIPS. It's a clear pattern of intimidation. At this point, I've gone full malicious compliance. You want a doctor's note? Fine. My doctor was so pissed on my behalf. She literally wrote HIPAA protections into my note and said I would need multiple intermittent days off and might even be late to work or have to leave early a few times. And no, they can't ask why. I'm not playing their illegal games. I'm documenting everything, filing with labor and industries, and then I'm taking it to the freaking board. I'm just so angry and hurt. I've been accused of lying and cheating and abusing leave when all I did was get sick in a goddamned preschool. This blackout policy is BS and abusive and exploitative, and the worst part is it's still one of the best preschools I've ever worked at. I'm so tired. Do yourself a favor and contact an employee rights attorney. Document everything and do not tell anyone you're speaking to a lawyer. I really don't have any money for an attorney. A lot of labor attorneys work on contingency, so you don't owe them anything unless you win your case. Be sure to get confirmation of that in writing from the attorney's office, of course, but don't just assume you can't get a lawyer. You could also check for attorneys doing pro bono work. Most state bars require or heavily encourage a certain amount of pro bono work from lawyers practicing in said state. Sounds like you've got this in writing. Email. Contact Labor and Industries. They will help you. I showed this to my friend in HR at another company, and she said, I'm amazed they're putting this all in writing because they broke multiple laws in the email chain. I kept expecting them to call me into a meeting to intimidate me or something, but they were just so overconfident. You can tell they've done this before. I'm so happy you're standing up for yourself and your fellow coworkers. I'm 16 weeks pregnant and just bawling my eyes out at this predicament. We have a pregnant coworker, and they've been horrible to her too. I've noticed they're the meanest to people who stand up to them, which is classic bully behavior.